Welcome to Reform Thinking. I was reading recently about the world of high-end art forgery, and there's this one detail that always catches my attention.
Oh, really? What is it?
Well, when a master forger creates a fake Vermeer or like a counterfeit Rembrandt, they don't usually get caught because they messed up the big things. The page is period accurate, the canvas is old, the signature looks spot on.
Right, they get all the obvious stuff right.
Yeah. The forgery is so good it often tricks the counterfeiters themselves. But eventually, some archivist with a magnifying glass looks really closely and finds one microscopic anomaly.
Like a modern brush bristle or something.
Yes, that is it, a synthetic bristle stuck in the paint, and the whole illusion just shatters right there. I'm always wondering, why do the most convincing fakes so often blind the very people who are holding them?
I mean, I think it is because they have fallen in love with the illusion, you know? When you want something to be genuine, your brain actively filters out the microscopic anomalies.
That makes sense. You just see what you want to see.
Yeah, you ignore the synthetic bristle because acknowledging it ruins the entire investment. And back in the 1800s, Charles Haddon Spurgeon took that specific dynamic, falling in love with a flawless forgery, and applied it to the human soul.
Oh, wow. That is a heavy pivot.
It is. We are doing a deep dive today into a sermon of his called The Touchstone of Godly Sincerity, which is based on the book of Job, chapter 27, verse 10. Spurgeon describes the hypocrite as an exceedingly neat imitation of a Christian.
So, to the casual observer, they look and sound perfect.
Yeah, he compares them to base coins. A counterfeit coin might have the right stamp, the right shine. You can scarcely detect a problem by just listening to it or ring on a table. It requires rigorous chemical testing to reveal that it lacks pure gold.
So our mission for this deep dive is to dissect those subtle differences between genuine spiritual life and well-crafted hypocrisy. And for you listening right now, this is not about pointing fingers at the person sitting in the pew next to you.
Right. This is an internal audit.
Absolutely. We are going to provide the precise tools Spurgeon outlined to test the authenticity of your own faith. We are looking for that microscopic modern brush bristle on the canvas of our own hearts. So let's look at the setup in Job 27, verse 10. We find Job in a state of absolute devastation.
We really do. Job has lost his wealth, his children, his health. He is sitting in ashes, scraping his sores with a piece of broken pottery, and he is vehemently defending his innocence against the bitter insinuations of his friends Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar.
We often call them his unfriendly friends.
Yeah, that is a good way to put it. They have been sitting with him, looking at his unimaginable suffering, and concluding that Job must be harboring some secret, scandalous sin.
Because their theology dictates a strict retribution principle, right? Like, God only punishes the wicked in this way, so Job has to be a fraud.
That is their logic. If Job is innocent, their neat theological boxes break, so in their minds, he has to be a hypocrite.
They're acting as his prosecutors. They want a confession. But Job pushes back hard. And we need to clarify that Job isn't claiming sinless perfection here.
No, not at all.
Spurgeon compares Job's stance to the Apostle Paul writing to the Corinthians. Paul said, "I know nothing against myself, yet I am not justified by this." Paul had a clear conscience regarding secret scandals, but he knew they did not make him perfect before God.
Right, Job is doing the same thing. He is violently rejecting the idea that he harbors a vain pretense or secret guile. He's saying, I am a sinner, but I am not a hypocrite.
And Job realizes that his friends are about to formally charge him with hypocrisy, so he gets them to the punch.
Yeah, he lays out the features of a hypocrite himself. He becomes his own prosecutor to forestall their verdict. He judges himself so that he might not be judged by them.
He essentially says, let's look at what a hypocrite actually is, and you will see I do not fit the profile.
And this requires immense psychological weight. Job recognizes the reality of deception. Spurgeon points out that Satan has been the manufacturer of impostors for thousands of years.
But because Satan is dealing in falsehood, he always leaves a weak point.
Yes. His lies, as Spurgeon puts it, are a little too strongly scented. They smell of a lie. The mimic Christians he produces are overdone in one place and slovenly in another.
I find the mechanics of that self-deception fascinating. We tend to picture hypocrites as, like, sinister actors rubbing their hands together, intentionally deceiving the masses. You know, the classic mustache-twirling villain.
Oh, for sure. That is the caricature.
But the way Spurgeon frames this implies that hypocrisy isn't always a conscious plot. Sometimes the hypocrite is simply a dupe of Satan, completely unaware of the flaw in their own disguise. They have fooled themselves.
Yeah, the counterfeit might not know they are a counterfeit. A person can adopt the vocabulary, the cultural habits, and the moral framework of Christianity without possessing a new nature.
Just going through the motions.
Think about how this works psychologically. You start going to church, you enjoy the community, you learn the theological jargon, you adopt conservative moral habits because they make your life better. Your brain registers all these positive behavioral changes and concludes, I am a Christian. It is behavior modification masquerading as regeneration.
And because this self-deception is so prevalent, it requires a foolproof testing mechanism.
Yeah.
We cannot rely on our own feelings to tell us if we are genuine because our feelings are heavily influenced by confirmation bias.
We need a touchstone, a black stone historically used to test the purity of gold and silver.
And Spurgeon identifies that touchstone. He says the primary indicator of spiritual vitality, the grand test point, is prayer.
Yes, pray.
He goes back to the story of the Apostle Paul's conversion. When God wanted to prove to a very skeptical Ananias that Paul, the man who had been murdering Christians, was actually converted, God didn't point to Paul's new theology.
No, he did not point to his charitable giving either.
Right. God said, "Behold, he prayeth."
Prayer is the telltale sign. It is the pulse of spiritual health. You want to know if someone is alive, you check for a pulse.
The process of spiritual quickening, of being made alive by God, begins with a cry to him.
Yeah, it's the most basic, fundamental reflex of a new nature.
I hear that, but my immediate pushback is that a hypocrite can pray. I mean, people in every religion pray. The Pharisees prayed on the street corners. So if prayer is the test, it seems like an easy one to fake.
They mimic the action, yes. Because a true believer prays, the deceiver takes care to make mention of God's name. They learn the cadence, they learn the right theological buzzwords to string together.
But Spurgeon insists there is a radical difference between life and death in these prayers, even if it isn't apparent to the naked eye.
He uses this striking imagery. He asks if the prayer is like Jonah's gourd.
Oh, from the Old Testament.
Yeah, a plant grew up over Jonah in a single night to give him shade, but it perished just as fast the next morning. Or, is the prayer like the early dew that glistens beautifully in the morning sunlight but evaporates entirely when the heat of the day arrives?
It is like someone buying top-tier, expensive gym gear. They buy the weightlifting shoes, the chalk, the customized belt. They learn all the fitness terminology. They know about macros and hypertrophy.
Right, they look the part.
They even go to the gym parking lot and post selfies. But they never actually lift a single weight. They mimic the outward action. They look the part completely, but they possess none of the internal reality.
There is no actual muscle breakdown.
Exactly. There is no actual exertion. They are getting the social benefit of being seen as a fitness enthusiast without bearing any of the actual physical cost.
The hypocrite has the gear and the vocabulary, but no actual communion with God. The outward form is there, but the internal mechanism is completely stalled.
And this establishes prayer as our baseline, which brings us to the specific, penetrating question of Job 27, verse 10.
Job asks concerning the hypocrite, will he always call upon God? This is a test for the test itself.
A test for the test. We know he prays, but will he always pray? We need to stress test the equipment to see if it holds up under pressure.
And Spurgeon breaks this word always into 4 distinct trials to see if the gold is pure. The first trial is consistency, which evaluates the geography and the mechanics of our devotion.
Is the prayer occasional or constant?
Right. Spurgeon points out that a hypocrite is very happy to pray on street corners and in synagogues for public viewing. They thrive on an audience, but they avoid the closet. They avoid the secret place where no one is clapping for them.
Because the public prayer offers a massive social return on investment. You get seen. You get perceived as pious.
Yes.
Private prayer offers zero social currency. It forces you to just be alone with your own thoughts and God. And Spurgeon contrasts this with genuine biblical examples of prayer.
He points to the Old Testament patriarch Isaac. Isaac was known for walking out into an empty field at dusk just to meditate in silence.
He also points to Peter seeking isolation on a housetop in Joppa.
And Daniel retreating to his private chamber in Babylon, and Christ pulling away from the crowds to pray in the darkness of the Garden of Gethsemane.
The genuine believer actively seeks out these private spaces. The hypocrite finds private devotion to be too hot and heavy a business for his soulless soul.
It is incredibly boring to them because there is no audience to impress. If you don't have a genuine relationship with the person you're talking to, spending an hour in a quiet room with them is pure torture.
You want distractions. You want other people around to buffer the silence.
Spurgeon also talks about something he calls ejaculatory prayer.
Yeah, to modern ears, that term sounds strange, but In the older English context, it means a prayer that is darted up to heaven quickly, like a javelin. Short, wordless cries for help.
These are the brief, sudden appeals to God throughout the day. The Christian prays at the counter while working, in the busy street while walking, or instantly when facing sudden opposition.
Spurgeon says the natural soul cries out to God like a child cries for its mother. It is an instinct.
You don't have to schedule a meeting for a child to cry out when they scrape their knee. It's a reflexive mechanism.
Compare that to the mechanical religion Spurgeon calls out, praying by the almanac, observing Ash Wednesday or Easter simply because an ecclesiastical calendar dictates it, rather than from an inward compulsion.
It is viewing religion as an external schedule you adhere to, rather than an internal reality that spills over into your daily life.
He uses a brilliant analogy here.
Yeah.
He compares mechanical religion to a fungus forced to grow by artificial heat in a greenhouse.
Think about how a hothouse works. You pump in humidity, you control the temperature, and the fungus grows incredibly fast. But it is entirely dependent on that artificial environment.
If you take it outside, it dies instantly.
Genuine faith, he says, is the rosy fruit of a healthy tree. It grows naturally outdoors facing the elements because there is actual life in the root system.
Okay, if I am listening to this, my instinct is to immediately look at my own life and panic. I struggle with private prayer. I get distracted. I have seasons where I don't feel like praying at all. Does a lack of desire on a random Tuesday immediately mark someone as a hypocrite?
That is a very fair question.
If we are looking for that synthetic bristle, is my occasional boredom in prayer the proof that I am a fake?
The distinction is critical here. A healthy tree can experience a drought. A genuine believer will absolutely face seasons of dryness, distraction, or severe spiritual fatigue. But the difference lies in the distress that it causes.
The distress.
Think about the mechanics of hunger. A living body that hasn't eaten will eventually experience hunger pangs. It hurts. When a true Christian struggles with private prayer, they feel a sense of loss. They feel like they are starving.
They groan under the weight of their own coldness.
Yes. The hypocrite feels no distress at all. In fact, the hypocrite is relieved when the duty is over. They check the box and move on. The believer mourns their lack of prayer. The hypocrite is indifferent to it.
The distress is the proof of life. A corpse doesn't complain about being hungry. So if evaluating where we pray exposes our motivations, it forces us to look at how our prayer life responds when our external environment drastically changes.
Right. If you are only praying in the greenhouse, what happens when you step outside?
Which moves us to the second trial, continuance. This is about weathering life's extremes of joy and sorrow.
The central question of continuance is, will the hypocrite pray in times of pleasure, and will they pray in times of despondency? Spurgeon answers firmly that the hypocrite will not pray during certain pleasures because they engage in activities that are utterly incompatible with devotion.
He gives some very striking 19th century examples here. He talks about trying to write a collect for a pious young lady at a theater.
And for listeners who might not be familiar with high church liturgy, a collect is a specific type of short, focused prayer.
So imagine trying to compose a holy liturgical prayer while sitting in a raucous 19th century theater. He also mentions a gentleman shuffling a pack of cards, a religious burglar breaking down a door, or an assassin committing a murder.
Obviously, the burglar and the assassin are extremes.
But what is the underlying logic he is hitting at there?
The underlying logic is cognitive dissonance. You cannot ask a holy God to bless an action that insults the holiness of heaven. The hypocrite handles this by compartmentalizing their life.
They have their religious box on Sunday morning and their worldly pleasure box on Friday night.
Yeah, they instinctively know the two cannot mix. They do things they know they could not honestly pray about. The genuine Christian, on the other hand, strives to avoid anything upon which they cannot ask their Father's blessing.
Think about the modern equivalents. It is the person who posts a Bible verse in the morning and then spends the afternoon ruthlessly gossiping and tearing down their coworkers to get ahead for a promotion.
You can't pray, Lord, bless this slander I'm about to spread so I can get a raise. The two actions cancel each other out.
So the hypocrite just stops praying during the slander. They pause their religion.
That compartmentalization is a hallmark of the counterfeit. They view God as a boss you check in with, not a reality that permeates every second of your existence. So that is how they handle joy or pleasure. On the flip side, what happens in sorrow?
Spurgeon says that when a damp, cold mist obscures the view, the hypocrite freezes first.
Spurgeon points to King Saul in the Old Testament. Saul is a fascinating psychological study. When things got difficult, when the Philistine army was gathering and God went silent, Saul didn't lean into prayer. He succumbed to his despair.
He decided religion had lost its utility, it wasn't working anymore.
So he turned to the witch of Endor to hold a seance. He abandoned ship because the weather got rough and the immediate payoff vanished.
Compare Saul's reaction to King David. When the floods come, the genuine Christian prays more. Despair of self drives the Christian to God.
David says in Psalm 130, "Out of the depths I cry to you, O Lord."
A worldling's despair makes them rave against God. A Christian's despair drives them to the feet of God.
If a tragedy hits, it strips away all the polite religious veneer.
Have you ever noticed that a funeral knell or a sudden, unexpected tragedy is often the starkest revealer of where a person's trust actually lies? When the medical test comes back with the worst possible news, the artificial heat of the greenhouse shuts off instantly.
The hypocrite walks away from the faith, claiming it didn't work. I prayed for healing, I didn't get it, therefore God isn't real, or he isn't worth my time.
But the believer, experiencing their exact same agonizing tragedy, falls to the floor and says, "Where else can I go?"
That extreme reaction to circumstances reveals whether a person understands their true state in the universe. If you only pray when the sun is shining, or if you abandon God the moment suffering enters your life, you are treating God as an accessory to your happiness.
You view him as an app on your phone designed to optimize your life.
You do not view him as the source of your existence.
So if a tragedy exposes that a hypocrite only views God as a fair-weather rescue boat, it forces us to look at how they treat God on a totally normal, uneventful day. Do they recognize they need him just to take their next breath?
Which moves us to Spurgeon's third category: constancy, the perpetual state of need.
Constancy evaluates our understanding of our own frailty. The believer recognizes they are dependent on God's will for every single breath.
Spurgeon states that nothing stands between us and the grave but God's decree. If you grasp that reality, you realize you are in a perpetual state of vulnerability. We are always beggars and regular pensioners.
The genuine Christian knows they face constant danger from the world, the flesh, and the devil. He brings up a term here, spiritual dry rot. I want to unpack the mechanics of that.
Yeah, that is a great visual.
Dry rot in a house happens quietly. The wood looks fine from the outside, but fungi are breaking down the cellulose, leaving it brittle and weak. You don't notice it until you lean against a beam and it crumbles.
Spurgeon is saying our souls are prone to this. We decay internally if we aren't constantly maintained. We need protection night and day.
He gets highly specific about the environmental factors that cause this dry rot. He talks about the twin dangers of wealth and poverty.
We tend to think of poverty as a trial and wealth as a blessing. Spurgeon says both are active threats.
He says we have to pray against money gluing to the hand and poisoning the heart. Wealth creates a powerful illusion of self-sufficiency.
When your bank account is full, your brain tells you that you are safe.
And on the other end, we have to pray against the envy and discontent that haunt the narrow lanes of poverty. Both extremes are trying to destroy you.
Wealth tries to destroy you by making you think you don't need God. Poverty tries to destroy you by making you resent God for withholding what you think you deserve.
This is exactly why the hypocrite fails the test of constancy. The hypocrite treats prayer like a morning wash or putting on their slippers.
They do their 2 minutes in the morning and think they have settled the business for the entire day. They check the box.
They don't see the need to pray constantly because they are totally blind to their own danger.
They don't see the dry rot. They do not recognize they are always sinning. They don't see the need to intercede for the dying world around them.
The hypocrite views prayer as paying a daily toll at a booth. You toss your coin in the bucket in the morning, the gate lifts, and you are good to drive all day on your own. You have paid your dues.
But the Christian's view of prayer is like wearing a scuba tank underwater. You don't just take a deep breath in the morning and say, I'm good for the day.
Taking the tank off means certain death. You need continuous, unbroken access to the air because the environment you are walking through is hostile to your lungs.
The hypocrite feels self-sufficient. The Christian feels desperate. The Christian feels the pressure of the water all around them.
And understanding this constant, desperate need provides the fuel required to keep going when answers from heaven seem delayed. You don't take off the scuba tank just because the swim is getting exhausting.
Which sets up the fourth and final trial beautifully: importunity and perseverance. Will the individual pray when answers are delayed?
This is where Spurgeon brings in the Suffolk horse analogy. and I think it perfectly captures the psychology of perseverance.
Spurgeon talks about how farmers judge a good horse. Many horses will pull hard when they feel the wagon moving behind them. As long as there's momentum, as long as the wheels are turning and the load is light, they are happy to work.
But if they tug and the load is a dead weight,
If the wheels are stuck in the mud and nothing stirs, they quit. They lose interest. The Suffolk breed, however, is different. They will tug at a dead weight until they drop.
you could harness a Suffolk horse to a solid oak post, and they would pull until their heart gives out.
Their drive to pull isn't dependent on the friction of the wagon. It is bred into the bone.
If you apply that to prayer, the hypocrite is the horse that only pulls when the wheels are greased. If there's a big church revival, if the music is swelling, if emotions are high, the hypocrite can pray up a storm.
The wagon is moving. They are getting that dopamine hit of feeling spiritual.
But if things are quiet, if the answer is delayed for years, if it feels like they are pulling against a concrete wall, they give up.
The true Christian is the Suffolk horse. They pull up the dead weight. They pray for decades for a wayward child, even when nothing seems to change.
Spurgeon grounds this in the biblical narrative of Jacob wrestling the angel at the river Jabbok. Jacob wrestled all night. The text says the angel touched Jacob's hip and made the sinew shrink, inflicting severe physical pain and a permanent limp.
But Jacob refused to let go. He said, "I will not let you go unless you bless me."
Spurgeon observes that a hypocrite would have retreated to his tent at the very first sign of pain.
The hypocrite negotiates with God. The true believer wrestles with him.
You see this play out in how people quit. Hypocrites quit in two specific scenarios. They quit when they don't get what they want. But shockingly, they also quit when they get what they want.
The first scenario is obvious. If God doesn't answer according to their timeline, they get offended and walk away. But the second scenario is far more revealing about the human heart.
Spurgeon gives the example of a man on his sickbed.
He is terrified of dying. He groans. He makes grand vows. He promises to dedicate his life to God, to give to the poor, to attend church every Sunday if he just gets better.
I mean, we have all seen this, right? The desperate bartering, God, if you get me out of this mess, I swear I'll change.
And then the fever breaks. His health returns. His nerves are braced.
And where his prayers are gotten, the vows are ignored.
The moment the terror is removed, the motive for his religion is gone. His prayer wasn't a desire for God, it was a desire for health. God was just the vending machine he was kicking to get the medicine out.
Spurgeon references a story here from Addison's Spectator about an atheist sailor, and it captures this dynamic perfectly.
The story goes that there was an atheist on a ship, and a massive storm hits. The ship is going down. Suddenly, this atheist is on the deck, crying out to God, weeping, begging for mercy.
He is the most devout man on the boat.
But the storm passes, the waves calm down, they reach the shore safely. And what does the sailor do? He tells the gentleman who heard him pray to ignore it, claiming it was just the delirium of the storm, nonsense brought on by panic.
Once you take away the trouble, you do away with the motive. They put on the cloak of religion to stay warm in the freezing storm, and they throw it off the second the sun comes out.
But the trouble doesn't always have to be a literal storm or a sickness. Spurgeon also talks about how hypocrites quit due to social pressure, ridicule from old friends.
A hypocrite might start making professions of faith, but then an old business partner drops by and makes a coarse joke. They ask if he has turned into a fanatic.
And because the hypocrite has no real root, they feel embarrassed. They blush, they backpedal. They value the social standing in their immediate peer group more than they value the truth.
Or conversely, prosperity ruins them. They get wealthy, they climb the social ladder, they move to a nicer neighborhood, and suddenly they feel that the people they used to worship with are beneath them.
They seek out a fashionable, high society church that demands nothing of them, discarding the very truths their ancestors suffered martyrdom to defend. They trade their theology for networking opportunities.
It's a tragic state. Spurgeon paints a brutal picture of the hypocrite's eventual condition. They end up holding on to the forms of prayer with no heart for it.
They are keeping up spiritual respectability with no spiritual income. It is like living in a massive mansion with no furniture and dodging the creditors every single day.
The mental toll of that is staggering. Spurgeon calls this being the devil's double martyr.
The devil's double martyr. Let's unpack that because it's a haunting phrase. A martyr is someone who dies for a cause, but the hypocrite dies twice.
They suffer twice.
They suffer now, enduring the sheer exhaustion and nausea of maintaining a fake religious profession that they actually hate. Imagine the daily fatigue of pretending to love something you find completely boring.
And then They suffer ruin hereafter for having insulted God with their insincerity.
They get the worst of both worlds. They miss out on the pleasures of the world because they are trying to look religious, and they miss out on heaven because their religion is fake.
Okay, after laying out such a devastating and thorough set of tests, consistency, continuance, constancy, and perseverance, anyone listening to this is bound to be feeling the heavy weight of self-examination.
If we are really looking for that microscopic synthetic bristle on the canvas, we are bound to find flaws.
We all get distracted. We all have moments where we treat God like a vending machine. So what do we do with this heavy realization?
Spurgeon doesn't leave us in a state of paralyzing despair. He moves to the resolution. He recounts a conversation he had with the director of a life assurance company.
This director had ordered an actuary to go over all their accounts and tell them the absolute, unvarnished truth.
The director said, "If we are in a bankrupt state, tell us. If we are flourishing, tell us." He wanted the truth, even if it meant ruin, because he knew that running a business on fake numbers would eventually lead to a catastrophic collapse.
Living in a beautiful mirage is vastly more dangerous than facing a hot, burning desert of reality. At least in the desert, you know you need to find water.
In the mirage, you die of thirst while smiling at a hallucination. The true Christian desires the same ruthless audit of their soul. They pray, "Lord, let me know the worst of my case. Expose the dry rot."
But this audit will inevitably produce doubt. When you look closely at your own heart, you're going to find mixed motives. You are going to find selfishness.
Conscience and Satan will team up to accuse you. They will whisper that your faith is a fiction, your prayers are a joke, and your profession is a lie.
They will point to that moment you failed the test of constancy and say, "See, you're just a hypocrite."
When I hear that accusation, my instinct is to immediately start building a resume of my good deeds to prove Satan wrong. I want to defend myself.
I want to say, look at my prayer journal. Look at my church attendance. Look at the money I gave away last month. Does Spurgeon think this strategy works?
He argues it is the worst possible strategy. He uses the analogy of Alexander the Great and the Gordian knot.
According to historical legend, there was an immensely complicated knot tying a chariot to a pole in the city of Gordium. The prophecy stated that whoever could untie it would rule all of Asia.
Countless wise men and kings tried to pick at the ropes and untie it, and they all failed. Alexander arrived, looked at the tangled mess, drew his sword, and simply sliced it in half. He cut the knot.
When our minds are tangled up in doubts about whether we are genuine or hypocrites, we shouldn't try to untie the knot by arguing our own merits.
Untying the knot is trying to justify yourself. It never works because your resume is always flawed. You will never win a debate with your own conscience because your conscience knows your darkest thoughts.
So you cut the knot. You surrender the argument completely.
You look at Satan and you look at your own accusing conscience and you say, "You are right. If I am no saint, I am a sinner. I admit my total bankruptcy. I have no merit."
But Christ came into the world to save sinners. I do believe on him, and therefore my transgressions are blotted out.
Why is it that completely surrendering our defense and admitting our total bankruptcy is actually the most liberating action a human being can take?
Because it shifts the foundation of your confidence entirely off of your own performance and onto the finished work of Christ.
The hypocrite is exhausted because they are trying to maintain a performance. They are terrified of being found out. The Christian finds rest because they admit they have no performance to offer.
They bring nothing but their need. The pressure is off. You don't have to pretend the canvas is perfect anymore. You just hand it over to the master artist.
That profound act of starting over by grace leads us to the conclusion of our analysis.
To briefly recap, we have looked at the vast difference between the neat imitation of the hypocrite and the genuine, begging reliance of the true Christian.
We have tested the waters through the consistency of our private prayers, our continuance through both joy and sorrow, the constancy of our desperate need, and our importunity when answers are delayed.
The hypocrite finds religion to be a weariness. They hold on like a pack horse out of mere formality until the artificial heat runs out. But the believer, though they stumble, operates from a principle of life.
And that leaves us with a final thought to consider, something that builds on everything we have discussed today. Spurgeon mentioned that the hypocrite eventually finds religion to be a weariness, and the artificial heat runs out.
But what if our periods of severe spiritual exhaustion and dryness are not signs of failure, but rather the greatest diagnostic gift we could receive?
Think about it. It is precisely at the moment when the artificial heat of enthusiasm completely dies that we find out the truth about our own hearts.
In that exhaustion, when the music stops and the feelings fade, do we drop the pack and walk away because the performance is over?
Or do we fall to our knees because Despite the weariness, we are beggars who literally have nowhere else to go.
When the archivist's magnifying glass finds the flaw on our canvas, do we burn the painting in despair, or do we run to the master artist for grace? Let that reality sit with you.